The moment the front door clicked shut, the house exhaled. It wasn't a whisper of air, but a sudden, profound silence that swallowed the last echoes of my parents' car pulling out of the driveway. They were gone for the weekend, leaving me, a supposedly responsible 17-year-old, in charge. The house, usually bustling with life, now felt like a vast, empty cavern. Every shadow stretching a little longer, every familiar object taking on a slightly sinister edge in the dimming afternoon light. A shiver, not entirely from the cool air, traced its way down my spine. I was finally alone, and for the first time it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like an invitation. I tried to shake off the unease. This was my house. I'd lived here my whole life. There was nothing to be scared of. I put on some music, loud enough to fill the silence, and started making popcorn, trying to convince myself that a movie marathon was exactly what I wanted. But even with the pop music thumping through the speakers, the house still felt aware, like it was listening. As night fell, the sounds of the house began to assert themselves over the music. The old pipes groaned, the refrigerator hummed a low, constant note, and the wind outside rattled a loose pane in the living room window. Normal house sounds, except for one. The faint creak came from upstairs. I paused, popcorn halfway to my mouth, and listened. The music was still playing, but I strained to hear past it. Nothing, just the usual house noises. I told myself it was the house settling, or maybe the wind playing tricks. I resumed my movie, but my focus was broken. Every few minutes, I'd find myself listening, waiting, and then it would come again. Creak. This time it was clearer, definitely from upstairs. And it wasn't a random creak. It sounded like a floorboard giving way under weight. Someone walking. My heart began to pound. I lived alone. My parents were gone. There was no one else here. I turned the music down, then off. The sudden silence was deafening, amplifying every tiny sound. My own breathing seemed impossibly loud. Creak, creak. It was slow, deliberate, moving from the hallway towards my parents' bedroom. Each creak was distinct, heavy. It wasn't a mouse. It wasn't the house settling. I grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy ceramic mug, my hand shaking. My eyes darted around the living room, searching for an escape route, a weapon, anything. The back door, too far. The front door, also too far. The creaking stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the noise. It felt like whatever was upstairs had stopped, too. Stopped and was listening. Listening to me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Hello," I called out, my voice a pathetic croak. It sounded tiny, swallowed by the vastness of the house. No answer, just the heavy, oppressive silence. Then, a new sound. Faint, dragging noise, like something being pulled across the carpet in the upstairs hallway. Scrape, scrape. It was slow, heavy, and seemed to be moving towards the stairs. My blood ran cold. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the entrance to the living room, where the staircase was. I could feel my body trembling, my muscles screaming at me to run. The dragging sound grew louder, closer. It was on the landing now. I could almost feel the vibrations through the floor. And then, a shadow fell across the archway leading to the living room. It was tall, impossibly elongated, stretching from the top of the stairs almost to my feet. It was too dark to make out any features, just a looming, distorted shape. My breath hitched in my throat. I squeezed the mug so tight my knuckles turned white. The shadow lingered, unmoving, for what felt like an eternity. I imagined a grotesque figure, twisted and ancient, standing just out of sight, its gaze fixed on me. Then, a single heavy thump echoed from the bottom of the stairs. It sounded like something large had just landed. I didn't wait. I dropped the mug, which shattered on the floor, and bolted for the kitchen. The back door. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers numb with terror. The dragging sound was behind me now, closer, faster. Scrape, scrape. I finally got the door open and burst out into the cool night air, not bothering to close it behind me. I ran across the lawn, not looking back, not caring where I was going. only that it was away from that. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the street, gasping for breath, my legs burning. I never went back into that house alone. My parents tried to tell me it was my imagination, the old house settling, but I knew what I heard. I knew what I felt. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when the wind howls just right, I still hear it. The slow, deliberate creak of the floorboards upstairs, and the chilling scrape of something dragging itself through the silent house. The rain hammered against the window panes, a relentless drumming that usually lulled me to sleep. Tonight, it only amplified the unsettling quiet of the house. My older sister, Maya, was at a sleepover, and my parents were out for their weekly date night, leaving me, 13-year-old me, completely alone. I tried to be brave, to enjoy the rare solitude, but as darkness bled into the living room, painting the familiar furniture in distorted shadows, a prickle of unease started to crawl up my neck. Every creak of the old house, every gust of wind that whistled through the eaves, sounded like a deliberate movement, a soft footfall just outside my awareness. I pulled the blanket tighter around me on the couch, my eyes fixed on the large picture window, where the rain-streaked glass reflected my own anxious face, and something else, just at the edge of the dark. I told myself it was just the reflection of the streetlights, or maybe a trick of the rain. The living room window faced the backyard, a dense thicket of overgrown trees and bushes that became an inky black void after sunset. There was nothing out there but our old swing set and a shed. Nothing that could reflect back like that. I blinked, and the faint, distorted shape in the reflection was gone. Just my face, pale and wide-eyed, staring back. I sighed, trying to calm my racing heart. It was just my imagination, fueled by too many horror movies and the spooky atmosphere of a stormy night. I picked up my phone, scrolling through social media, trying to distract myself. The rain continued its steady assault, a comforting white noise. But then I saw it again, a flicker, a movement in the reflection. This time it was clearer, a silhouette, tall and slender, standing perfectly still in the backyard. It wasn't my reflection. It was outside. My breath hitched. I slowly, carefully, lowered my phone, my eyes glued to the window. The reflection was faint, distorted by the rain, but it was unmistakably there. A figure, standing among the dark trees, facing the house, facing me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the drumming rain. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come out. My throat was tight, constricted by pure terror. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to be gone. When I opened them again, the figure was still there, unmoving, watching. It didn't look like a person. It was too tall, too thin, its limbs seemed to bend at odd angles. It was just a deeper shadow among the shadows, but it felt intensely, terrifyingly real. Then it moved, slowly. One arm, impossibly long, lifted. A hand, with fingers that seemed too slender, too numerous, reached out towards the glass. It wasn't touching the window, but it was close. So close. I scrambled backwards on the couch, knocking over a lamp. The sudden crash echoed through the quiet house, making me jump even higher. The figure in the reflection didn't react. It just stood there, its hands still outstretched. A faint, sickly sweet smell began to seep into the room, mingling with the scent of rain and damp earth. It was cloying, metallic like old blood and something else, something rotten. The rain outside seemed to intensify, hammering harder against the glass, as if trying to drown out whatever was happening. But I could still see it, the reflection, the figure. Then, a new sound, faint, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from the window. Tap, tap, tap. It was soft, delicate, like a fingernail gently touching the glass. My eyes darted to the actual window. Nothing, just the rain. But in the reflection, the figure's outstretched hand was now pressed against the glass. Its long, spindly fingers splayed. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't gentle anymore. It was a demand. And then, a low, guttural chuckle echoed from outside. It was a wet, raspy sound, filled with a chilling amusement. It wasn't human. It was too deep, too ancient, like something that hadn't laughed in a very long time. My blood ran cold. I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that it wasn't just a reflection. It was real, and it was trying to get in. I scrambled off the couch, my legs like jelly, and stumbled towards the hallway. The back door. I had to get out. I could still hear the tapping, growing more frantic, and the wet, guttural chuckle echoing through the house. I burst into the kitchen, fumbling with the deadbolt on the back door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the cold metal. The tapping was now a frantic scratching, and I could hear a faint, wet thudding sound, as if something was pressing its entire body against the window. I finally got the door open and burst out into the pouring rain, not bothering to close it behind me. I ran blindly across the soaked lawn, slipping and stumbling, not looking back, not caring where I was going, only that it was away from that. I didn't stop until I reached the neighbor's porch, pounding frantically on their door, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. I never looked at that window the same way again. And sometimes, when the rain falls just right, I still see it. A tall, slender silhouette in the reflection, its hand outstretched, and I hear the faint, chilling tap, tap, tap against the glass. The silence was the first thing that hit me. A thick, suffocating blanket that descended the moment the front door clicked shut behind my parents. They were off on their anniversary trip, leaving me, a seasoned 16-year-old, with the glorious freedom of an empty house for a whole week. I'd planned epic gaming sessions, late-night snacks, and absolutely no chores. But as the evening shadows stretched long and distorted across the living room, the silence began to feel less like freedom and more like a vast, empty canvas for my imagination to paint horrors upon. Every unfamiliar creak, every distant groan of the old house, seemed to whisper a warning. I tried to ignore it, to immerse myself in my game, but a persistent, unsettling feeling began to prickle at the back of my neck, as if I wasn't quite as alone as I thought. I tried to focus on my game. The vibrant graphics and explosive sound effects a welcome distraction from the oppressive quiet. But the feeling persisted. It was like a faint hum, just at the edge of my hearing, a low vibration that seemed to resonate through the floorboards and up into my chair. I paused the game, pulling off my headphones. The house was silent, utterly, completely silent. No hum, no vibration, just the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I put my headphones back on, scoffing at my own jumpiness. It was just my mind playing tricks. A few minutes later, I felt it again. The faint hum, the vibration. It was coming from the wall beside my desk. I pressed my ear against the drywall. Nothing, just the solid, cool surface. I pulled my ear away, shaking my head. I was definitely imagining things. Then, a new sound. Faint scratching noise. It was inside the wall. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was soft, rhythmic, like something small, perhaps a mouse, moving within the plaster. I frowned. We didn't have mice. Not in the walls anyway. And this sounded bigger, more deliberate. The scratching continued, moving slowly along the wall, heading towards the corner of the room. It was too regular to be random scurrying. It sounded like something was crawling. My heart began to pound. I stood up, backing away from the wall, my eyes wide and fixed on the spot where the sound was coming from. The scratching stopped at the corner. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. Felt like whatever was in the wall had paused, too. Paused and was listening. Listening to me. Then a faint, muffled thud, like something soft, but heavy, hitting the inside of the wall. Thump, thump, thump. It was slow, deliberate, and seemed to be moving downwards, towards the floor. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a mouse. This was something large. Something that was moving inside my walls. I backed away further, stumbling over my chair. My eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape route. The door. I had to get out. The thudding continued, growing louder, closer to the floor. And then a new sound. Faint, wet squelching. like something soft and viscous dragging itself along. Squish, squish, squish. The hum returned, stronger now, a low, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate through the entire house. It wasn't just in the walls anymore. It was everywhere. Suddenly, a faint crack appeared in the drywall, right where the sounds were coming from, near the baseboard. It was thin at first, then slowly, agonizingly, it began to widen. A fine dust of plaster drifted down. My breath hitched in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to be a nightmare. When I opened them again, the crack was longer, more jagged, and something dark, something glistening, was visible within the fissure. Then, a single, impossibly long, pale finger pushed through the crack. It was thin, almost skeletal, and covered in a slick, dark substance that glistened in the dim light. Twitched, testing the air. My scream caught in my throat. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. I was paralyzed by pure, unadulterated terror. The finger twitched again, then slowly, agonizingly, another pushed through, and then another, and another, until a cluster of pale, bony fingers, dripping with that dark, viscous fluid, were wriggling through the widening crack in my wall. The scratching intensified, a frantic, desperate sound, as if whatever was inside was struggling to pull itself through. The wet squelching grew louder, and the sickeningly sweet smell intensified, filling the room. Then, a low, guttural moan emanated from within the wall, a sound of profound, unbearable agony, or perhaps, profound hunger. I finally found my voice, a raw, primal scream that tore through the silence. I didn't wait. I bolted for the door, my legs like jelly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I burst out of my room, leaving the light on, and scrambled down the stairs, not looking back. I didn't stop until I was outside, running down the street, not caring where I was going, only that it was away from that. I didn't stop until I reached the neighbor's house, pounding frantically on their door, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. I never went back into that house alone. My parents tried to tell me it was just old house noises, but I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when the house is quiet, I still hear it. The faint scritch, scritch, scritch from within the walls, and the chilling squish, squish, squish of something moving just beneath the surface.